You'll do all yours first, and then once you guys are all done. Call the meeting on the McHenry County Zoning Board of Appeals to order.
You need an education.
The purpose for our hearing today is for a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. The applicant is Hartley Solar LLC. The application number is 2024-064. The property consists of approximately 37 acres and is located on the south side of Thayer Road, roughly 3,200 feet east of the intersection of North Queen Anne and Thayer Roads in Greenwood Township, Illinois. There's 5 PIN numbers associated with this application. I'll read them. It's 0803-200-006, 0803-200-007, 0803-200-008, 0803-200-023, and 0803-200-028. I'll have the members of the zoning board introduce themselves and the township in which they reside, starting on my left.
Mary Donner, Greenwood Township.
Robert Cozen, Algonquin Township.
Charlie Eldridge, Richmond Township.
I'm Linnea Kustra in Alden Township.
Vicki Gardner, Nanda Township.
Kurt Schnabel, Riley Township. Bill Kernick, Grafton Township.
This petition has been reviewed and the following items have been received prior to today's scheduled hearing. Publisher's certificate of publication from the newspaper is dated November 13th, 2024, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. Affidavit of posting was signed and date posted was November 15, 2024. Affidavit of mailing was signed and date mailed was November 8th, 2024. Both meeting ordinance requirements. The survey has been checked against the petition, legal notice, and publication in the newspaper, and all 3 match. Filing fees have been paid. The endangered species consultation has been received, and the McHenry County Soil and Water Conservation District report has been received. This is NRI number 240834639. For those who aren't familiar with how a zoning hearing works, I just want to kind of go through how things will proceed today. The petitioner is here to give testimony as to why they think this solar farm should be approved. They will be under oath, as well anyone who is here that might want to ask a question of their testimony. If you want to ask a question, you have to limit it to the testimony that's been given today. You can't go outside the bounds of what's given today. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. It's being recorded. I ask that you be respectful. This is a hearing. This is not a rally. There's no applause or yelling out for somebody that you support or if you don't like something. But you will have every chance to ask a question or make a comment. So the petitioner presents their evidence. They're asked questions by the board and by the staff. And then if any member of the public would like a question, you'll have 3 minutes to ask whatever questions you want. If you don't get them all answered, turn your questions over to someone else so that, we can get this done as quickly as possible. You're not repeating something, but you get your questions answered. And I'll just be using the timer on my phone. After the testimony has been given and the questions answered, then the staff will present their report to us. And after that time, then if you have a comment, so the first time you ask a question, you don't give any comments. But after all that is done, you have 3 minutes to give your comments. What you feel about this petition, how you would like us to vote, any issues for or against, that's your time to make your comments. So at this time, anyone who will be speaking will have to be sworn in. So if you're going to ask a question, if you're going to give testimony at all, I would ask you to raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you affirm that the testimony that you are about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. So at this time, we'll proceed.
Thank you, Chair and CBA members. I'm John Carson. I'm the founder and managing partner of Trajectory Energy Partners. We are an Illinois-based company. We were here last year and presented 2 projects, Plowshare Solar and Azurite Solar. I know there's a couple new members since we were here last, but I also know you've heard a lot about solar and community solar. So obviously jump in with questions or clarifications clarifications, but we will try to respect the fact that you've heard a lot of this before. A little bit more about us quickly. We are based here in Illinois. We work on projects from the Wisconsin border to darn near the Kentucky border. Two of the closest projects we've developed are Rockford Solar, that is right in the center of the city of Rockford. You can see it there on the left. And closest to here, project that's constructed and operating would be Poplar Grove Solar. It's right at the intersection of 76 and 173 northwest corner there. That one is up and running and operating. It's inside the boundary of Poplar Grove. We worked with the village that didn't have an ordinance before then. A little bit more about us. We try to be a careful developer that is bringing projects to ZBAs that we know can get built. Last year, we were here with Plowshare Solar and Azurite Solar, two projects that are connected to what's called the Marengo substation. And we spent over a year working with ComEd to ensure there would be capacity on that substation. In fact, looking at some projects that didn't necessarily have a path forward made those possible. We also make a commitment that our projects will be built with union labor. As an Illinois-based company, we think it's important these projects are creating well-paying jobs for the people that build them. We work closely with a lot of public sector entities. We have one project we developed in Brimfield, Illinois, near Peoria, where about 100 feet from the football field is going to be a 2-megawatt community solar project right on school land. Dixon Park District, counties, townships. I think we've worked with every form of local government on a project except for a mosquito abatement board. Haven't done one of those yet. One thing I'll mention a little later is we really are focused on how can we make this a vibrant economy here in the Midwest and try to partner with local contractors on that, and also work very, very closely with the different Illinois incentive programs. You might remember our projects, Plowshare Solar, what was called a community-driven community solar project. That project will be coming online late next year. I want to introduce our lead developer on this project, who will take it from here, Mac Kopinski.
Wonderful. Mac Kopinski, Trajectory Energy, Northern Illinois Project Development Manager. Again, we'll try and keep it brief here. I know you guys have heard it a lot before. There's a little bit about subscriptions here. So basically residents, businesses, municipal entities, of whom we're working with multiple on our Plowshare project, will have the opportunity to virtually subscribe to a portion of the output and get a guaranteed discount on their electricity bill. So happy to talk more about that after the hearing for anybody who might be interested in hearing more. A little bit more context on the project. It's a 5-megawatt project on 37 acres, powering roughly 1,125 homes. And we anticipate it'll come close to $100,000 in annual electricity savings to those who subscribe to the project. Our landowner, Chris Dom, is here today. You can see on this image, his house is just in the southeast corner of the image there. A little bit more context on where the project is, just northwest of Wonder Lake, west of Miller Road, and south of there. So why is the project here? It's probably our most frequently asked question. Why, with all the land available in Illinois, is the project specifically located here? From our landowner's perspective, there are a couple of reasons. Number one, this is some of his least productive farmland that he has available. And then also, he does own several parcels in the vicinity. Placing the project here means that we don't have to split up the parcels, which would make farming efforts more difficult.
And I wanted to say a little bit more about how the ComEd circuits out there drive where these projects are located. I know you've heard that in general. Our team at Trajectory has mapped every inch of the ComEd circuits across McHenry County and frankly every other county in ComEd territory. If you sort of think of McHenry County in the 4 quadrants, almost every circuit in the north and the southwest quadrants are completely full. Our projects, Plowshare and Azurite, were some of the last two that are going to have room on that large Marengo substation that serves almost all of western McHenry County. There is capacity on the lines in places like Crystal Lake, where ComEd has much heavier lines to serve the higher load. Areas like this are sort of that mix where there's a significant number of residents, which means that there is more demand on the ComEd lines. And on Thayer Road, you can see the three-phase line that runs along Thayer. It's coming from Circuit in that area. And I think what I will tell you is that the projects we bring before the McHenry County ZBA, we know they can work from an interconnection perspective. We do sometimes look at other projects that apply and wonder exactly what their interconnection plan is, but this one has a signed interconnection agreement with ComEd, and we know that there is space for that project. But that's about it on these circuits. So these ComEd circuits really do drive it, and there is a limited capacity on them.
So this is our south site layout, a few things that I wanted to call out. So you can see the access drive in the northeast corner there, along with the utility poles where we will be interconnecting. We did put screening on the west, north, and east side. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then in terms of the system itself, I know the board has had questions on this before, but specifically consists of 40 inverters, 2 transformers, and then 13,832 solar panels.
There's one aspect of the site I really want to spend a moment on, and that's the topography of the site. So as Matt mentioned, we plan to put screening along per your ordinance on the northwest corner, all along the north and on the northeast corner. And I think you have a very thoughtful ordinance on screening requiring native shrubs. Matt will talk through that in a little bit. But when we talk about screening, I do always like to give the caveat that screening only works depending on the topography. But in this particular case, what we have is a site that has a pretty substantial slope to the west. In fact, there's a little bit of a ridge up here in the north corner. It's pretty flat across to the east, across the neighbors to the east, and it drops over 40 feet by the time you get to the western boundary. So what does that mean? It means that in some cases we have the exact opposite. If there was a house right here, we'd have to plant, white pines here in order to screen a 40-foot hillside. But when you have homes to the east and the land drops across, and it really begins dropping pretty quickly, that means that screening can work quite well because cuts off a little bit of the horizon there and you really can't see below it. Now, one additional piece we'd like to do, those of you who were here for our Plowshare and Azurite application, on those we were able to work with neighbors on some adjustments to our plan and sit down and work that out with them ahead of the hearing. Mackle and Hale will talk a little bit later. We did send letters out, we did an open house, we knocked on doors and had a number of conversations. But in those conversations, didn't get any specific requests for adjusting some of those tweaks of the projects. But to ensure that this screening, in particular that we plant along the east, that we have sufficient space to get that screening just right, we would like to, and we'll give Kim some exact language on this, in that northeast quadrant, increase our minimum setback from 50 to 75 to make sure that we have sufficient space there to get that screening on the northeast just right. On the north side, with the right-of-way there, there'll be plenty of space to maintain that screening, but that's an additional consideration that we'd like to add and ask that you add that as a condition or whatever the appropriate way would be. But again, I think this is a particularly interesting site. It will work quite well for a solar tracker system as those run north and south and really flow with the land. But with that drop off, really won't be visible over the top of that screen. I will turn it back over to Matt.
So we're proposing an agricultural style fence here for the project, as opposed to a traditional chain link fence. We think it meshes a little bit better with the landscape and as well as have a little bit bigger hole, so it allows some smaller wildlife to be able to fit through it. It is a single-axis tracker system. This is something that you didn't see as the norm even 10 years ago. The increased maintenance cost associated with the tracking system didn't justify its use in most cases. The technology has gotten to a point where it requires very, very minimal maintenance, and the increased production that you can get off of a single-axis tracker that tracks the sun throughout the course of a day justifies its use. And when we have the space available, it's what we use on most of our projects. We will be planting pollinator-friendly habitat. This is standard on all of our installations. Few of the key benefits. So one, it'll reduce erosion, help native pollinator populations, and then as well as improve the soil and water quality. In addition, it's very, very low maintenance. So proposed screening will be a mix of native shrubs and prairie tallgrass. Here are a few of the options listed here. We know how seriously McHenry County takes its shrubbery and vegetation. So as we get closer to construction, we'll make sure that the solution that we align on complies with your standards and your ordinance.
One thing I wanted to highlight here, the company that we worked with to prepare this report, NRS Natural Resources Services, is a good example of a Midwest-based company that we're supporting and think has a lot of expertise. They started in Minnesota, which is probably about 8-10 years further along in the solar journey than Illinois is, and have a robust business there, designing seed mixes. They put our mix together for this. And we actually have been bringing them so much business that they opened an office here in Illinois. They have an office in Princeville, Illinois. They worked with us on everything from mowing sites to putting these screening mixes together and maintaining these vegetative screening. It's, as I'm sure you've all seen, it's really important that that's done well, and we're proud to be working with an Illinois-based company on that.
So in terms of construction, a typical construction schedule for a project of this size is about 9 to 12 months. The project will look like it's mechanically complete a lot sooner than that. There are a lot of electrical components as well as interconnection that take a little bit longer to finish things up. There'll be a fence erected early on in the process, so that'll help protect the equipment and workers. And then we get a lot of questions about how much concrete is going to be used on the project. Only concrete we're anticipating is for the two transformers, which will take up the amount of space, roughly 12 by 15 feet. Decommissioning, as you're all well aware, we'll be placing financial assurance to pre-fund the decommissioning of the system. So if, knock on wood, we aren't around in 30 years when it's time to take the system out, I certainly hope to be. There'll be funds there to ensure that it can be decommissioned. And that is a state requirement as part of entering into an agricultural impact mitigation agreement with the Illinois Department of Agriculture. So John touched on this a little bit earlier, some of the community outreach that we did. I did a neighbor mailing on October 25th. That was in addition to what the county did in terms of providing notice. We did door knocking on November 5th. It was a rainy day that day, which added another flavor of fun for the people who chose to talk to us. And then we held an open house on November 12th. Kind of our goal with outreach is never to change anybody's mind, but to help answer any questions that they may have about solar or otherwise. Hal, did you want to touch on some of the additional outreach?
Sure. So when we
Could you introduce your?
oh, I'm sorry, Hal Sprague, the community engagement manager. So I play a large role in talking to people in the neighborhood and local leaders about the project ahead of time before we get here. When we go to the houses and knock on the doors, and sometimes we actually get to talk to somebody, but we take the packet that you have kind of in front of you. We have 3 or 4 documents. There's the detailed slide deck, we call it, with lots of pages. There's a 2-page that shows the map of the site and often a picture of the actual map that John's been pointing at up there. There's the solar overview that is in the back of your packet that is about 9 pages of questions and answers and links or sites for the data. If somebody wants to go back and research it more, a lot of studies that have been done are listed in there, and that's sort of good for them to anybody who wants to dig into it a little more and know the background. The deck, as you know, talks a lot about the benefits of the project. So we do want the neighbors and the other leaders of the community to know all the things that are good for the community, and I'm sure Mac will talk a little bit more about it, but it's important because we would like people to see this as an asset in your community because it does produce economic benefits in many ways, and so it's important to kind of run through those with the people who are in the neighborhood. And also at the bottom, there are other entities that we reach out to. For example, Greenwood. Since it's in Greenwood Township, I made a presentation to the Board of Trustees of Greenwood Township on October 21st. It's about 6 weeks ago. Answered their questions. I think the road commissioner was actually there, Don Goad and others. So that was a very useful presentation opportunity. It was generally well received, and there were plenty of questions. I got to answer those questions, and they all got the packet of information that I was describing. Separately from that, I did talk to Don Goad, who's the highway commissioner. This Thayer Road is a township road, so he's obviously interested in how it's going to look up in that corner where we have the access driveway and how the trucks are entering and leaving and driving in. How many are there? How heavy are there? There is a road use agreement that we will have with the township. It will include the details of what the access road looks like and how the trucks are being used on any given day. And also there's as you probably know, there's a bond that we set aside with money to pay for any possible damage that might occur to the road. He and I have talked several times about how the apron, where the trucks actually enter, is going to be big enough and wide enough and sturdy enough so that the ditches and the culverts and things that are there are not going to be damaged. But of course, it's the backstop of the agreement and the bond, so that if there happens to be any damage, we're going to take care of that. And that's set up ahead of time. And finally, we always make sure we reach out to the fire department, since they will be the responders, the emergency responders. And I've talked to Assistant Chief Dennis McFarland about it. I've given him the packet, and he said that his staff would be reviewing that and get back to me with any questions or concerns. That was a week ago, and I haven't heard anything back from him. So I'm assuming that up till now, at least, they don't have any concerns. They have seen many of these as you have, and they know how to react to them. They don't have any serious concerns.
Thank you, Hal.
So a few of the project benefits. Number one, total project cost we're anticipating somewhere around 10 million. An interesting part of that is roughly 60% of that is labor. So we're making a commitment to union labor, so that's going to be money going into the local economy. Tax revenue, we'll show you this a little bit on the next slide, but the system actually gets a special assessment from the state, which we are responsible for paying. And that's typically somewhere to the tune of anywhere from 10 to 20 times greater taxes being paid as a result of that assessment, increasing your property tax base. Talked about it a little bit earlier, the anticipated be annually roughly $99,000 in electricity savings to the community and people who choose to subscribe. And then of course there's the pollinator-friendly ground cover that we talked about earlier. So here's an interesting slide. It's actually not always this extreme, but you'll see there the current property taxes annually about $515. After the solar system goes in year one, it's going to be north of $35,000. So it's a pretty big increase there, and then you'll notice that most of that is going to the school district, so that'll be a delta of over $25,000 in year one that goes to the school district.
Thank you, Mac and Hal. So we'll end there. As Hal mentioned, we have a package with additional information. I'd be met Mike Von Bergen from the drain tile district. If you want to, we could dive into drain tile. We can dive into any aspect of the project, but just want to say we're excited to see our first few projects we've developed start coming online here in McHenry County. In other parts of the state where we've worked, it's been exciting, particularly over the last year, as projects that have been talked about for years are coming online. property tax checks are being paid. We work with partners like OSF Healthcare, who are seeing $100,000 plus savings on community solar subscriptions every year, and neighbors who are now living next to active sites and having conversations about how they're not causing them any problems. So I'll pause there and we'll take any questions.
I was looking at the standards for commercial solar energy facility that need to be addressed, and I think you've covered them all. Maybe I missed one, but lighting. Did you cover lighting?
Yes, we did not, but there will be no lighting at nighttime at these projects. It'll be dark.
Okay, and then also access granted for inspection by the county and the local fire district. I know you talked about the fire district, but also for the county, that's a standard you'll have to meet.
Absolutely, and what you typically see for the fire district is a Knox box that they have the code to and are able to enter.
And then also damaged solar panels, the issue with them. Did you cover that? I didn't.
I did not, but in our packet, we actually have a slide about the recycling industry that is coming online across the Midwest and across the country. And we also have a really exhaustive study that we worked with the BBJ group on, talking about the lack of any toxicity concerns from the panels, even when they are damaged, which rarely happens.
And our standard is that those panels must be repaired or replaced within 60 days of damage.
Absolutely.
And you're comfortable with that.
Definitely.
Can you address the drain tile issue? Can you just kind of go through kind of how you deal with that on
Yes.
the project?
So first of all, we have a handout in here from a company based out of Rochelle that we typically work with, Huddleston McBride. As part of the process, before we would even apply for a building permit, we do an extensive drain tile survey. Our landowner, Chris Dahm, is obviously very familiar with the drain tile. This particular project has a feature you don't see all the time, which is a series of terraces that run north and south. Because they run so perfectly north-south, they'll be easy to incorporate into the design of our project that does as well. Well, even though Chris knows where all of those drain tiles are, and there's even a couple risers out there, we will do a full survey, make sure that the system is in full working order after construction is completed, and work with the district as well to ensure that it's in working order. It's important for us that it be in working order after construction as well.
Okay, we'll start with questions from the board, starting on my right. Bill, Mr. Kernan.
You have not, I know, some of the residents, at least a couple of emails that we received or letters we received, addressed the impact on property values that your project will have. You could just address that, please.
Absolutely, sir, and I believe we included in our packet for the board property value study that was done. There's a number of these as more projects are coming online. We are not seeing an impact on local property values. I think there's a couple factors that play into that, but one of the factors of renewables, both wind and solar, is the increased property taxes that are paid supporting local schools. Which frankly is the #1 driver. Strong, healthy, well-funded local schools are typically the #1 driver of property values. But for the record, our study that we submitted shows that there is not an impact on property values.
This is the Cone Resnick study that
Correct.
you're referring to. The sites that they analyze and determine impact on property values, how do the use of the sites that are in this data compare to this year? I mean, for example, a lot of the projects that we've seen, the entire parcel that's at issue has not been completely covered with panels. So panels can be, in some of the situations, the panels can be scooted over to one corner of the property, pretty far away from residential as an example. And if that data is in the study, that doesn't help us a lot when we see this type of situation. Do you have any idea? Can you address that problem?
Absolutely. Some of the examples in the Cone Resnick study actually have neighbors that are on all 4 sides of the project. I'll quick go back to our first slide. We are regularly seen projects that are coming online like Rockford Solar, which have houses or buildings on all 4 sides. So I think one of the most interesting data points that CohnReznick has seen that I think is telling is they actually call assessors and say, has anyone called you and asked to reassess the property value because they're next to a solar farm now? And according to their research, they've yet to find someone. They actually included the Winnebago County assessor for our Rockford study. So I think what we're seeing on the ground is, especially with the screening, with a site like the one, what I do think is unique about this site is that western slope that you have that will obscure most of the project for most of the neighbors.
I'm just looking at some of the data here. They talk about power. I'm looking at page 3 of the report. If you have that handy here. And I'm looking at a table that's on page 3. I'm welcome to use my copy if you have.
Got it right here.
In the 4th column, it has power output, MW AC.
Yep.
Is that megawatt acres or megawatts per acre?
That's megawatts total. So Heartleaf Solar is a 5 megawatt project. So you can see it's squarely in the middle of the examples here. They have a few that are in the 20 to 40 range, a few that are smaller, and one example that is 5 megawatts. It's typically about 7 acres per megawatt AC for size.
Okay. And I see that some of the site acres here are fairly small site acres that are listed in the table.
Yep.
Comparable to, I suppose, even smaller than what we're looking at here.
Some smaller and some larger.
Has there been any consideration to moving the, I'll call it the noise generating equipment that's located in the northeast corner to the southeast corner of the property? And is that feasible given where you have to make the connection?
It would not be that far to the far corner there, but that'll be one of the considerations as part of the building permit. Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about the state standards we'll be following on noise?
Yes, Ryan Granholm. I'm a member of the in-house legal team here at Trajectory Energy. Just briefly want to touch on the state of Illinois does have generally applicable noise standards apply across the state depending on the classification of the land at issue. Very detailed technical standards, for example, for different frequencies, there are different levels. They're established by the Illinois Pollution Control Board, and those will apply as they do across the state. That'll be something we'll have to meet.
Okay, I have nothing further.
Mr. Schnabel.
I'd just like to pick up on clarifying that last question for our audience members, and then I'll ask mine. I've got 2. Truth be known, there is no noise when there is no sun. There's no noise at night, correct?
Could you say that a little louder? Somebody answer. We want to make sure we get it
they're
recorded.
Just for everyone's clarification, edification.
They're quiet at night.
Quiet at night, okay, that clarifies that. Now, to continue on your last question, Bill, that you were asking, if you were to move all the transformers and so forth down to the southern end of the parcel, I don't care what corner, would you not also have to extend that driveway to the same location?
That's correct, sir. We'd have to extend the driveway and we would have to have power poles all the way down to it.
You could not bury that portion of it up to the interconnect poles?
You would definitely have to have the driveway. You could, that would be a quarter-mile long medium voltage.
I think that sounds less than ideal in my opinion, but my last question is on the agricultural perimeter fence. We oftentimes have requirement, and I want to ask if you've heard of this, where you show the fence going all the way down to grade, to the dirt basically, and there are some here in the county that like to see that elevated up like 6 inches or so, so the slightly larger little critters like turtles and things can get through, especially since you're so close to the creek.
We would absolutely work with the county on that. An interesting thing I've also seen, if you're familiar with this wire, it often has the smaller gauge at the bottom. I've actually seen it where it's flipped, and so the larger gauge is at the bottom.
That would be an issue that would be addressed at some point.
Yeah, I think one thing to maybe clarify a little bit for the audience is the extensive nature. This is a special use permit hearing to make sure that our proposed plan follows your ordinance, but there's a much more exhaustive building permit process to make sure every last piece is followed.
That's all I have. I'll pass along.
Ms. Garten?
Thank you. Are you the, do you lease this property?
We will. We have a option for a lease with Mr. Dom, and usually we begin the leasing the land prior to construction. But he will continue to farm it until the land is, until the project is ready to go to construction.
Okay. Now, the area around this proposed site, is that also farmed?
If we look at the different sides, so across Thayer Road to the north is residential. To the west is farmed, and then you have the district ditch there as well. To the south is also farmed by Mr. Dom, and then to the east is a neighbor on the northeast corner is, if you're familiar with the site, is a horse farm.
Okay. So basically, it's surrounded by farming except for the north.
Correct.
Okay. Let's see, I think that I really only have one more question, and I'm not even sure that this can be answered. But I've been hearing a lot lately about sort of an overproduction of solar energy in California. And it's to the point where they're shutting down solar farms. And they can't seem to catch up with the amount that they have. They can't use it, they're trying to sell it, they're trying to store it. Storing, of course, requires batteries of some sort, which are not allowed in this county. Do you have any plans for, or do you know of any studies that have been done on this in Illinois? I know that we've seen so many solar farms in the last few years that it almost seems as if we might be reaching that saturation point, and I'm wondering where we're at with this. I mean, I probably would have to talk to ComEd or to the governor about this, but I'm hoping that you have some information about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens in California is they call it the duck curve. Typically, you have a curve where demand peaks in the afternoon. Here in Illinois, it actually demand peaks around 4 to 6 p.m. as businesses are still sometimes running, but people come home, turn all their lights on. In California, they do have enough solar that, and here, in Illinois, our cheapest electricity, if you pay for it hourly, like I do, is at night. In fact, sometimes it's negative pricing here in Illinois. I have an electric truck, and sometimes at night I get paid to charge my electric truck because with our nuclear plants and our wind farms, we are actually overproducing. In California, their maximum production is at about 2 in the afternoon as all those solar farms are online. We are probably about 15, 20 years away from that being a problem here in Illinois. And I do anticipate that we will have a battery storage solution here in Illinois by that point. What's really interesting that's happening in Illinois, this was a part of CEJA, the big state law, that you don't hear about as much here in northern Illinois. But there was a provision in there to take all of those coal plant sites that are up and down the Illinois River and replace them with solar plus batteries. So all along that river, from as far north as Hennepin, all the way down to Alton, there are going to be sites that used to be coal plants, putting pollutants into the local air, that are now going to have 35, 40, 50, even 80 megawatt batteries. So I think when those are done in the next few years, Illinois is actually going to have the most advanced grid in North America. That was a long answer. I get excited about this stuff. The short answer is that we're many years from that here in Illinois, and we are already getting ahead of those solutions. We do have, some counties are putting thoughtful battery ordinances in place. Peoria County has one. We've developed our first project that's solar plus batteries. That's inside the city of Pekin, Illinois. But Heartleaf Solar will not have batteries as a part of it, to be clear.
Right. Are you planning on, this is completely different, okay? Now I'm going to talk about the plantings that you're putting in
Yeah.
between the panels. Will those be mowed, or are those going to be grazed upon by sheep?
We are not planning agrivoltaics for this project. I'm sure you've heard some proposals, and we are working on other projects that have planned agrivoltaics. Our plan here is to establish a really good pollinator-friendly site. It does, and this is why we work closely with that company I mentioned, NRS. We really need to manage these sites in the early years. I have a farm that I've planted about 5 acres back in a native prairie, and I always say it doesn't look great for the first couple of years, but if you maintain it well, it really looks fantastic. And some of the sites in Boone County and elsewhere, they've now established both the forbs and the grasses at a reasonable height, and they're really looking good.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Eldridge.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. I noted in our the report from the Soil and Water Conservation District that at the end of September they had not received a notice of executed AMA. At this point, is there an executed AMA?
I believe we have, Ryan?
Yes, there is, and I believe it's included in the application packet.
Okay, thank you. And do you typically continue to operate your projects, or do you sell them when they're complete and operating?
We do a mix. We have a portfolio in central Illinois that are starting construction now that we will own and operate, but we do partner with other long-term owners. Poplar Grove is an example where we developed that project, worked on it for 5 years with the village and the local landowner. Summit Ridge Energy is now the long-term owner of it, but we stay involved all the way through construction and into the early years of operation to ensure.
What are your plans with regard to this facility?
It's too early to say. It could easily be one that we keep in our portfolio, or we would if we bring on a different long-term owner operator, we make sure all the commitments that we made, the lease and the special use permit are all followed to a T.
Yes, well, they'd be legally obligated to, you couldn't transfer it without transferring that on.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I've got right now. Thank you.
Mr. Cozen.
Thank you. Could you just review your remote security monitoring and how your facilities are managed in that regard?
Absolutely. I'll pull up the, so if you've seen one of these projects, first of all, they each have a little weather station that is part of them. So you're independently monitoring what the wind speeds are. The systems are actually able to stow in a horizontal position if high winds are detected. And then each row, you're able to monitor the production coming into those inverters. So if there is something wrong, you're able to tell it remotely and go out and repair it. What you typically don't see here in the Midwest is any washing of the panels, because we typically, in other states, that's something you can also monitor remotely. It is something they have to do in California, but we get enough rain here to not worry about that.
Dealing with the vandalism or the curious and the idle, how do you detect that?
If they were to cause, so there is a perimeter fence around the whole thing. We haven't seen that be an issue. One project we developed down in Kankakee, somebody did try to dump some garbage on the driveway. That got reported right away and was taken care of, but we haven't had any instances on a project we've developed of any vandalism inside. If it caused any damage, you would know through the same mechanisms remotely.
And then your service companies, where do you draw from?
So that's another great part of, I think, investing in local companies. All of the contractors for the projects we've developed are local contractors. It's been really interesting seeing, you do have to get a good certification to be able to mow these sites, but you're typically not bringing in people from out of state to mow a solar project. We were really glad to see NRS established here in Illinois, so they're typically all local.
Any specific subscription companies that are you affiliated with or aware of that would be knocking on somebody's door to say, we're the facility down the road or that type? So how would you know that you're subscribing locally and not to a facility in Colorado?
Absolutely. So first of all, we, for the projects that we've developed and worked with local partners on, typically don't like to see and don't see knocking on doors. First of all, each of these projects can have an anchor subscriber taking up to half of the system. So our Rockford project on the left there, the anchor subscriber for that is actually the Rockford Housing Authority, and they're saving about $20,000 a year on their main facility, their largest residential unit for the main meter in downtown Rockford. I mentioned OSF Healthcare. They are the anchor subscriber, taking 40% on a number of our projects, and we directly worked with OSF on all those. These are also fantastic for public sector entities that oftentimes don't have a good site for solar on their own land or behind the meter. And then for the residential piece, one thing that we do, a company we work with is called Solstice. And they will work with local nonprofits, they'll work with local government entities and hold open houses, give people a chance to come learn about this. What's really interesting on subscriptions is that enough people have them now and are just regularly getting savings on their bill that we've actually reached the point now where there's far more demand for these subscriptions than there is capacity. So that's why with our project like Plowshare Solar, we'll be working with nonprofits here in McHenry County to make sure local people get a chance to subscribe.
Do you have a short list of potential anchors for this site?
Well, OSF Healthcare wants every kilowatt hour we can give them. Their Rockford facility uses over 100 million kilowatt hours a year. MAC has also talked to a number of public sector entities about Plowshare and some of our projects in Winnebago. There is a waiting list, frankly, for these now, because no one's putting a single screw in your roof, and you just sign some paperwork and you see savings on every month's bill.
Many of those public sector entities are located in McHenry County.
Sewer treatment plants, wells?
Yep.
Well, just to add one other thing, anybody in the ComEd territory, which is, most of like the northern quarter of Illinois, could be a subscriber to this solar farm, because it's just on paper. And unless you know about it, you wouldn't know to subscribe to it. So what John's saying is when it gets built, the effort will be to first notify everybody in this community so they get the first shot at it. And if they don't fill it up, which almost certainly they will, you could go further and further and further away to fill up the site, because you can only have so many, because each panel has to be spoken for by a subscriber. So once it's full of subscribers, then it's full, and then you have a waiting list of people waiting for somebody to leave so they can fill that spot with somebody else. But we want to make sure that the people who are in the community of the site to get the first shot at being subscribers, so the benefit stays local.
Sorry, the curiosity has me bit for a moment. So how long can a subscriber remain, or can they shop around by the minute, by the duration, by the day?
Residential subscribers, there's a contract. As a subscriber, you're signing a contract with the solar project. Every residential subscription I've ever seen is you can cancel at any time without any penalty. For a much larger, like an anchor subscription, there's usually, what OSF does is they have to give a year notice, and then there's no penalty if they were to, for a larger entity, contract often does have a cancellation penalty if it's without any notice.
But in the ComEd area, can I subscribe to one company in the morning and another one in the afternoon and a third one in the next morning?
Theoretically, that would be possible, but what you'd be shopping for is the highest discount rate. So our Plowshare project, for instance, as a community-driven community solar project, has a 20% subscription savings rate as part of that state program. That's higher than you typically see. So once you found one you were happy with, you'd probably stay with it. You can have multiple subscriptions though, and be on multiple projects at the same time.
Sound like my cable service.
It's like it's like maybe having 2-3 streaming services. But
One of the things they do require though is because it's not, there's no penalty associated with it, but if you say, I want to terminate my subscription, they'll say, well, we haven't sent you the bill yet for the last time period where your solar production gave you a credit. So you have to finish up the term. It's basically another month. Just like a lot of places say, finish out the next month and then you can cancel, but you have to pay us for the last time period that you got credits. So it might take longer than a day. It might take a few weeks.
So just to turn briefly to the property value impact report. The focused studies, only one was taken from Illinois. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct. The Streeter project down near LaSalle that's been around for about 12 years at this point.
Is there an anticipated update since this report came out on 2022?
There is actually a new report that's come out. Ryan, do you want to mention that? It primarily focused on utility scale or actually much larger projects.
Yeah, Loyola University in Chicago recently released a Midwest-based report that confirms a lot of the findings in the CohnReznick report you have in front of you. As John mentioned, that report focused on larger scale facilities, confirming that they don't have property value impacts. So our expectation would be if there's not an impact from living next to a 500-acre solar farm, there would not be an impact from a much smaller facility.
And you can make that reference available as part of the discussion of the record? Or
Yes,
is
I
that already on?
can provide you copies now if you would like.
No, I have enough to read, but thank you. And that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Downing. Thank you. I'm going to go a little bit further. This property value report is from 2022. How long from the time McHenry County okays your permit, realistically can we think that it will be under production and completed? How long will that take? Because you've got a lot of permitting to do, so that might be a year, it might be a year and a half, 2 years, 5 years, I don't know what that is. I just know that this isn't something that's going to crop up in the next foreseeable short-term time.
That's absolutely correct. The short answer to your question is honestly 2 to 3 years. And specifically to completion, to start of construction, maybe year and a half, 2.5. The range I've seen is the fastest we've ever had it happen. Our project down in Granite City, Illinois was only about a year from SUP. That's the only one. And that was to start a construction.
Okay.
And we've got 2 projects about to break ground in Peoria County that we zoned in 2018. So it can range.
So it can range pretty far, and that's assuming that you can still get all the permits that you need to do, and nobody else, every hoop that you need to jump through, you jump through, and it gets taken care of. The reason I'm asking is I appreciate all your legwork, but if this came out in 2022, there are a whole lot of permits that have been issued between then and now, and more that's coming out all the time. And I know the residents are all concerned about that. Not all of them get done, but some of them do. It will be nice to see this kind of impact report again soon, because we've had so many new ones, so much going in that is now working that wasn't working in 2022, so that we could get that updated, or somebody can get that updated report that's going to be more reflective of what's happening now.
Absolutely.
Because McHenry County seems to be everybody's place of wanting to come and put in solar if they can. So, and it makes sense. We've got so much agricultural property to be able to do it. We are confined by our resources to do it, but we have to. So I just want to make sure that eventually, I just got this today. How many pages is this? 65.
And Ryan,
In
if
10
you wanna
minutes to-
distribute the Loyola
10
studies,
minutes.
we'll share it.
Yeah.
We'll share this academic study with you,
I would
and
like
then,
that.
just to reiterate one point that John made earlier, one of the key factors influencing the timeline for construction is the interconnection agreement with the local utility. In this case, that's ComEd. We have been issued an interconnection agreement already.
Okay.
We will be signing it in the next few weeks.
Okay.
And so when John mentioned sometimes these projects sit around for longer, that tends to be in utilities that take longer in parts of the state where the process is slower. But we've already reached the end of that process with ComEd, so that should help the project come online sooner.
Okay. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. I have a few questions as well. At the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about the quadrants in the county.
Yeah.
And the limited capacity, the room on ComEd lines. And you said at some point, it'll be as much as ComEd can handle. Where are we in that process? Are we reaching capacity of that now? And so like, how many more solar projects can we expect in the future before ComEd says we have no more room?
So if you think about the county in sort of 4 quadrants, right now, we are basically full for the northeast, the northwest, and the southwest. That Marengo substation serves the whole western half of the county, plus a bunch of Boone and DeKalb, is full. But sometimes projects drop off. And we watch those circuits like a hawk and are ready to.
So that would
jump in.
be that, why would they drop off? That they can't get the permits that they need, or
Correct.
for what? Okay.
Yep, they can't get the permits that they need, or the project, they discovered something on the site that made it unviable. This is just a personal guess, but we are very familiar with every SUP this county has issued, and my personal guess is less than half will ever get built.
From what has already been approved?
Yeah.
And that's because there won't be capacity on the lines?
Yes, there are sometimes we see an SUP go through and don't see them show up in the interconnection queue. Now in the southeast quadrant, Crystal Lake and sort of heading towards Lake and Cook County, where you have higher density residents and just electric demand but less land, you might someday see what you're starting to see in Cook County, which is community solar projects on rooftops. I think we're probably about 5 to 10 years out from proposals of community solar canopies over parking lots. Right now, none of those projects pencil out. But eventually, that'll be the last remaining spot where there's room on the lines.
And so just to clarify, when you say SUP, that would be like our conditional use permit?
Correct, yes, here it's conditional use.
Special
permit.
use
Yeah,
versus conditional use, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, same, one and the same, just a different
basically,
name.
yeah.
Okay. So it sounds to me like there won't be many more projects coming before us because of that substation and those 3 quadrants really being pretty much full with what's already been applied for, unless a project drops off.
I think that there might be other developers who would ask for a conditional use permit before knowing where they are on interconnection.
Okay,
Our approach is to know where we are on interconnection before we come to you.
okay, and this company NRS, what does that stand for?
Natural Resources Services.
Okay. And then with the township road, the road agreement for when you're under construction, and here in McHenry County, we post those township roads so that, there can't be heavy equipment during the spring when the roads are, more at risk of being deteriorated from heavy equipment. So will you have some agreement that you won't be doing anything when the road is posted?
Absolutely. There will be a road use agreement with the township prior to building permit being issued and construction happening.
And another question, what determines if you decide to operate this yourself or sell it off? when you look at a project?
Partly geography. We've started with a cluster of projects across central Illinois, but we very much, I think in 1.5 to 2 years when this project is closer to construction, we'll be ready to expand into northern Illinois. So geography actually plays a big piece of it. Would we have sort of a concentration of projects across a couple counties?
That's all I have. Before I take any questions from staff, would you, and your
Madam
question
Chair?
was answered.
Madam Chair, I'll just ask one question regarding what we just received.
Sure, of course.
Has this study from Loyola been peer reviewed? I'm looking at the footnote on the first page and I can't tell.
We did not author this study. It has been published in an academic journal. My understanding is that it has been peer reviewed.
By the journal, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Southeast McHenry County is an area I'm somewhat familiar with. Point is the distinction between transmission and distribution.
Yeah.
There are a substantial amount of transmission lines in that area. Is that facilities excluded, your facilities, from accessing those? And yet, is it a technological barrier or is it a operational?
It's a size and who's in charge of it. So our large transmission lines here in northern Illinois are run by what's called PJM. They're in charge of the grid from northern Illinois all the way to New Jersey, all the way down to Virginia, all of Ohio, Pennsylvania. So they operate everything above 34 kilovolts here in Illinois. We're an interesting part of their grid, because when the sun is still shining out here in Illinois, it's dark in Pennsylvania at the end of the day. So that's why utility scale projects connect to that grid. You typically don't see anything connecting to that grid less than a bare minimum of 20 megawatts. This one's 5. Typically it's 100 or more. I know you've approved some permits for projects of that size out by Marengo, but I don't think any are built yet. On the ComEd grid, which that transmission lines that run through McHenry, they drop down into a number of large ComEd substations, like the one in Marengo that I mentioned. And then from there, ComEd runs 34 kilovolt lines out to their local substations, and then those drop down to the 12s. And our projects can connect onto either a 12 or a 34. Here on Thayer Road, it's a 12 kilovolt line that we'll connect to.
And the facility we see along the tollway, the substation at I-90.
Yeah.
And so forth, Spring Creek.
Those are, what you're seeing there is that is where those high voltage lines are. Sometimes they'll have a switching station there where they can run the energy in different directions, but what you're mostly seeing there is the energy is dropping down from that interstate grid onto ComEd's grid right there.
Another one?
Bear with me. You mentioned the day and light distinction between New Jersey and the Midwest. There's a discussion going on about having a standardized daylight savings time. Do you see that having an influence in terms of your consumption rate?
It wouldn't, because whatever time we call it, just literally, it's still light out for a couple hours here when it's already dark there. So our projects will be a really important part, not our project, but what Northern Illinois projects will be an important part of balancing that overall grid when there's high demand on the East Coast.
Thank you, madam.
Okay. Ms. Charlo, do you have any questions?
Just one question, just for clarification. John, you had mentioned about the screening on the northeast side of the property there. You indicated a 75-foot setback. Is that just to the equipment that you're committing to as far as appeasing the neighbors so that you can put the screening in? The reason I ask is because the state regulation is 50 feet, we wouldn't have the ability to actually add a condition that it be 75 because we can't be more restrictive than what the state requires. You certainly can increase it, but I wasn't sure if you meant you were going to be increasing the width of the screening itself or just increasing the setback.
Increasing the setback and ensuring that we have all the sufficient, it will move the panels a little further back for those neighbors, but it also will ensure we've got all the room we need to maintain that screening. So if you're not able to do a condition, just to clarify for the official record, what we're talking about is on the eastern side, the northern half. And there's one particular pin here that we'd be increasing from 50 to 75 along that adjacent pin.
To be even more specific, we'll commit that the panels will be set back at least 75 feet from the property line of parcel number 08-03-200-025.
Thank you.
And speaking about the state statute, Kim, for the benefit of audience that is here, can you talk about the state statute and what it limits us to do?
Sure. So last year, the state of Illinois did pass legislation that mandated that counties do approve requests for commercial solar energy facilities as long as minimum standards are met, including setbacks, height restrictions. Basically, it's the siting standards of where they're located. So the county would not have the ability to deny this as long as all of those minimum regulations are met.
I just need to clarify, when you spoke about which piece of property, the last one you said was 08-03-200-025?
That's correct. 08-03-200-025.
Okay,
That's
it's
not-
not
that
on
can't
our,
be correct.
it's not
That's
on
not
our
right?
petition.
No.
No.
Okay,
It's
let me
not one of
get that
the
parcel
things.
number for you again.
You're talking about the adjacent property,
Yeah,
right?
and
Yeah.
it's not one of
Parcel,
It's not one
Yeah,
of the.
so not,
Okay,
yep.
okay,
that's
I just
adjacent.
wanted to make sure that there's so many.
Okay, are we all done with questions? Everybody's had their
Yes, ma'am.
questions answered?
Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we will move to the public asking your questions. And so if you have a question, I ask you to come up, identify yourself with your name and address, and then again, limit your testimony to questions at this time, not comments, and it has to be only regarding the testimony. So does anyone have a question that they would like to present? Yes, sir, come on up.
Come up?
Yes.
We got to record it.
Yes, sir. My name is Steve Hickman. I'm a resident of 10204 Thayer Road in Wonder Lake here. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My first question was in regards to if this property was to be sold, so do you still have to pay for the decommission rights? Or do the new buyers of the solar farm, would they then have to be responsible for decommission?
That bond needs to be in place permanently. There's typically a process with the county to switch it out, but there can't be a gap where there isn't a bond. Well, once we get to that part during the building permit process.
Okay, good. I did have another, may I have another question?
Sure.
Excellent.
Yeah, you've got 2 more
During your
minutes.
property evaluations, right? So we've got this study from 2022. That's all well and good and fine. What my fear is, being a neighbor to the site, is, how can I phrase this better? It's not necessarily about the assessed value of the property that I'm most concerned about. If I want to sell the property, what I'm afraid of is being able to sell it with somebody coming in, looking at my house and going, well, I got an industrial site across the road. I had sent in my wife and I have been residents for 23 years at the site, rural living, and now we're having an industrial site. So my concern is, during your property values, has it been really evaluated? What were the selling, have any of these things, like your Poplar Grove site or your Rockford site, have any of those properties sold since those sites have been up in operation?
That specific question, sir, I couldn't answer. We'd be happy to share a copy of the 2 studies that we did. They did look at properties that sold after the project was built and compared them to properties in similar area. What I can anecdotally tell you is that what we often hear, the Poplar Grove site, I will never forget, there's a row of residences right on the eastern side of it, and what a couple of those neighbors told us is they wondered for years when a Lowe's distribution center was going to get built in their backyard, and now they know that solar is going to be their neighbor. What we've also seen is, like the Rockford site, when these projects have, there's a county board member who keeps in very close touch with us, who lives right across the street from that site. She keeps a close eye on it. And once these things are built and construction's over, they're a very quiet neighbor to have. So I would point you to our studies, and they did use that methodology. And then I want to be clear, anecdotally, those are examples of what we see in here.
If I could have a copy of the study, that'd be wonderful. I did not get one when we came to the open house.
Yeah.
My last question, if you don't mind. How many people can be signed up to this site? Is it 1,100 for subscribers?
If this, yeah, absolutely. If this project was only residential homes, it would be about 1,125. Likely it will have an anchor subscriber like an OSF Healthcare that would take a certain percentage. It really just, each home, you kind of do the same math as though they were putting solar on their roof. A large McMansion, if you will, in McHenry County might need 25 kilowatts of capacity. A small apartment in Crystal Lake might need 4. So it also depends on the electric demand of the subscribers.
Thanks.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Sure, come on up.
I'm Craig Fakuk. I've lived in Wonder Lake, Illinois for the past 55 years. I am a trustee in Greenwood Township, and I have one question relating to the excavation of the stands for your panels. Will there be an archaeological mitigation study done prior to any excavation because of the topography of the land?
Absolutely, there will. The state of Illinois is quite serious about that process. We go through a whole process to submit our projects. On most of them, there's a review to see if there's any Native American artifacts or otherwise. We do have a project in Peoria that's about to go into construction where we are carving off a little acre site, and it'll just sit there with grass on it because they did find some pottery underneath.
And will your find be reported somehow? If anything is to be found?
Ryan, I believe that would be public record at the state.
The process is run through the State Historic
State
Preservation
Archaeological
Office, and so I imagine that information would be available from that.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else have a question? Okay, then at this time, we'll move to testimony of the public, starting with the Planning Commission, or Planning Division.
Okay, so the subject property is zoned A1 Agriculture District. It is also surrounded by A1 Agriculture zoning. To the north, as was mentioned previously, there is some residential uses, and all other directions is agricultural. And for future land use designation is also agricultural, along with all of the surrounding area there. I don't think I have anything further other than just to mention again that all of the state and county regulations, minimum standards have been met. Staff has no objections to the request.
Does any of the board members have a question regarding the report?
I did.
Not a question for the staff.
I had a question. What is the nature of the conditional use on the north side of Thayer Road?
That was from 1956. It was to store airplane parts.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Anyone else have questions for staff regarding the report? Okay, at this time, then the public, this is now the time that if you have a comment regarding this petition, you have the opportunity. You'll have 3 minutes to be able to give your testimony. I would ask you that if you are agreeing with someone who has previously spoken, rather than saying the same things again, just say, I agree with my neighbor or something, so that we can move the hearing along so we could finish today. We just would really like that, so, so that we could vote. But we want you to have your opportunity to speak. You know, we want to hear whatever you have to say. So I would, again, invite anyone who wants to come up and speak, come up, give your name and address, and then what your views are. So anybody want to speak, just raise your hand. Yep, certainly, come on.
Again, I'm Craig Fonkook. I live in Wonder Lake. I've been a Greenwood Township trustee for the last 10 years or more. We had a nice conversation with the gentleman last month at the Greenwood Township Hall. It was a thorough discussion of what was going on here. I am not speaking as a representative of the board because they did not authorize me to do so, but I can say that the Greenwood Township trustees did seem to be in general agreement with the program. That's as much as I can say. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Again, Steve Hickman at 10204 Thayer Road. I had submitted a letter to the board prior to the meeting today, so thank you very much for accepting that letter. Just to reiterate what I've said in the letter, I've been here as a resident of the community and the property for 23 years, my wife and I. When we first moved into this piece of property in our home, we were under the impression that at some point in our lifetime there, we would probably have suburban sprawl, right? We were anticipating a subdivision being developed across the way or somewhere in the general area. And now after 23 years of rural living in a wonderful community with some great neighbors, now we appear to have an industrial site. And that was something that we weren't necessarily prepared for. So as I said in my letter, and I believe everybody has a copy of that letter, I just ask for the consideration that maybe this site gets moved a little bit further south from those of us that live to the north quadrant. I believe all of our neighbors along Thayer Road on the north side and even our fine neighbors to the east there would maybe appreciate if the site was moved to a little bit further into the central of the section. I understand some of the things that were spoken to in regards to that, but I would still like that to be considered. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Jim Cizek, and 10704 Thayer Road. It's the second closest property to the site. And I just found out yesterday, my neighbor to the west of me, with his family, moved in about a year ago, and had no idea what was going on. I remember like Max came to my house, explained everything to me. I knew what was going on a couple of months ago. And he had no notification, no signage, nothing mailed to him. And how could this happen in the notification process? Aren't you supposed to notify all the neighbors? All the people in the area?
Maybe Kim, can you address that?
What's the
Are you
rule?
directly across the street, or which property is yours?
I'm sorry?
Which property do you own?
I'm on the north side of Thayer Road.
Directly across from the
About
property?
75 feet away from
Yeah.
the site.
The state's, the state
Alex
statute
is 50
requires,
feet away.
it's not based on distance, it is based on anyone that is directly across the public way, so across the street or directly adjacent to the property.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing impaired. I'm not getting you.
If you're directly across from the property, across the street, or
Yes, he's across the street. My house is here, his is the next one west, and across the street is the solar site.
okay, yeah, if you are directly across, you would receive notice. If you're, adjacent to that, then you likely.
He's directly across. He's the closest one. He's got more property butted up to the north side of the site than anyone else.
Okay, yeah, I would be happy to
how
check
did that
our
happen?
notices, but he should have gotten notice if he was directly across.
See what?
You would have gotten a certified notice if he's directly across, but I'd be happy to check our notices and see if he got notice.
I think you said you will notify him and you,
He should have received notice.
okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Do you have, oh, yes, go ahead. Almost didn't see you.
I'm Gary Finley. I reside at 10112 Thayer Road, just a little bit off the map. Jim Blue just owns directly across from it. Thayer Road is the dividing line for school districts, so the tax revenue being generated would go to Woodstock schools. We're in the Alden-Hebron district, so the residents here that are going to be looking at this are not going to see the benefits to their school district.
And we've lived in our location here for over 30 years. And I would invite formally everybody on the board right now to come to our place and watch a sunset and tell me that this is the right spot. Because it's a quiet rural area. This downward slope goes to a creek that is part of the headwaters of the Fox River. I understand water survey's been done, and impact. But I think the character of the area will be changing rapidly. You said in the Loyola project where property values were not detrimentally affected, but that's an urban area. This is not Loyola. So I believe that property values here will be affected more than those properties will. And I know it will affect all of us that live in the area greatly. So we have quite a concern for the location of the transformers and the inverters being that close to our homes. So, again, I'd invite anybody to come out and watch a sunset from our location and tell me this is the right spot for this industrial site. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
I'm Stacy Splendoria. I moved to 6011 Miller Road, which is this 25 acres directly next to where these panels are going in 2000, I'm sorry. My dream was always to raise my animals and my children on a small farm. 25 acres is a small farm, I think. I believe this massive facility is out of character for the neighboring area, with it being principally rural and agricultural countryside. I understand this will generate income for certain people, but you can't put a price on peacefulness or tranquility. And I would like to ask that we relocate this further down. I know Mr. Dom owns a lot of other acres this way. If we could just move it, or move it, you know, this is it. This is where I live, and it's going to be directly where my horses graze, and my kids show sheep, and their sheep are out there. And I just ask that you please consider relocating. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Betty Mondruski. I do own that land, 6011 Miller Road. I have spoken with attorneys that have worked with people. It does devalue all the property around there, especially the rural areas. And the residents that are living there, if they do try to sell, it will devalue their property, because he has worked with many people already with that. I also know that the sunsets are beautiful. That was the whole idea. These people live there, and it's all going to be taken away. So all we're asking is that he move south, go behind his property instead of behind our property. He's got a lot of land that could go there. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I don't think people realize how massive
Please,
this
your
project
name,
is.
your name,
Oh, I'm
sir, and
sorry.
address.
Ray Mondruski, my wife and daughter.
And your address, please.
6011 Miller Road. This is our property. The entire west border of the property borders to this project. We're talking 37 acres. I don't think people realize how big that is compared to the homes and the small farmettes. Our farm is only 25 acres. So it's out of character with everything in that area. My daughter, like she said, has horses that graze and will graze right up to that line, has sheep that graze, chickens, and we feel that it'll be a total devastation to our property. She makes a living by hosting pony parties, children's parties, and nobody's going to want to go or come to an area, especially the 26 years that she's worked on it, to make it a bucolic destination. It's going to be just torn away. So we really feel, you know, if they want to do a project, fine. With all the land that's available, let's go somewhere else.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandro Mata, and I live exactly across from this solar panel that you guys are trying to create. I'm a year and 3 months into this house, and I did not expect a year, 3 months ago to expect to have this in front of my house. I drive straight out, I look straight, and all I see is fields, beautiful fields. Early mornings, late nights, my son, my wife, we walk out there, get the mail, look straight across of it, beautiful view. I do agree that this should be moved somewhere else because there is plenty of space and there's plenty of money to be made. Plenty of savings as well for the community, but there's plenty of space, different locations, and I do agree that it should be moved. Like my other neighbors say here, I did not expect to come to this a year and a half later. Well, not saying it's going to be built in a year, right? But 3 years, property values. Like I said, I agree to considering moving it somewhere else. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Stella Splendoria. I live at 6011 Miller Road. I have lived at 6011 Miller Road my entire life. My home is directly adjacent to the proposed solar farm. I love where I live. I love the property, the scenery, the peacefulness. I raise and show my livestock through 4-H on our family farm. It is my passion, and I'm asking that you please relocate this project to property not adjacent to my family's farm. Thank you.
Anyone else? Do you have a closing statement, sir?
I do if everyone's
No,
finished.
they're done. There's no more hands.
Excellent. I just very briefly wanted to just reiterate that it's a very important part of our process at Trajectory to reach out to all the neighbors in multiple ways. We did knock on every door. Not everyone was home. We sent mail. We held an open house, but we want to continue that dialogue, so I'll stick around after the hearing. I'm going to leave us at my cards here, and we'd like to remain in touch with all of the neighbors, so please do. Just a couple quick clarifications. The study was done by Loyola University, but it was a study of rural sites similar to this one as well. And just finally, I'll say I am really encouraged by what I'm seeing in other parts of Illinois with more projects that have been built. One quick example I'll point to is Galesburg, Illinois. Galesburg, about 10 years ago, the district administrator, their school district, decided to put solar at every school site in town. They have solar panels right next to their football field, right next to their kindergarten building, right next to their district administration. The community's used to it now. The city of Galesburg has changed their zoning ordinance that you can put a solar farm wherever you want in the city without permitting. So as we see these projects get built, we remain committed to working with the neighbors to be in touch with you, and we have seen these projects become just a regular part of the landscape where they've been around longer.
Okay, so at this time, we will close the hearing portion of the meeting and we'll move on to the voting portion. Again, this is for application 2024-064, conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. Staff offers the following conditions for consideration. Number 1, the conditional use shall have no time limit unless the use is abandoned, as specified in 16.56.030.pp.4 of the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance. Number 2, site development shall be in substantial conformance with the site plan prepared by Trajectory Energy Partners, dated October 29, 2024. Number 3, the decommissioning plan shall be applicable in part as well as in whole. If any portion of the commercial solar energy facility ceases to perform its intended function for more than 12 consecutive months, that portion of the facility shall be decommissioned in compliance with all the terms of the decommissioning plan. Number 4, a McHenry County stormwater management permit shall be secured prior to construction. Any damaged drainage tile shall be repaired at the expense of the petitioner and in a manner satisfactory to the Water Resources Division Manager. Number 5, a detailed landscape plan illustrating compliance with required landscape screening standards and Illinois Department of Natural Resources pollinator scorecard standards and land management practices shall be approved by the zoning enforcement officer prior to issuance of a construction/building permit. Number 6, fencing shall be provided in compliance with the National Electrical Code as applicable. The use of barbed wire is prohibited. Setting fence posts in concrete is prohibited, except for gate posts and where otherwise required for stability. Number 7, all requirements of the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance, Section 16.56.030.pp, as amended, subject to State of Illinois Public Act 102-1123 and Public Act 103-0580, shall be met or exceeded unless specifically amended by this conditional use permit. Number 8, all other federal, state, and local laws shall be met. Are there any other proposed conditions?
Madam Chairman, I move acceptance of the conditions as proposed.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Eldridge, second by Ms. Donner, to accept these conditions. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Mr. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Ms. Donner?
Yes.
Mr. Kernick?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so the conditions are approved 7-0. This time I would entertain a motion for the
Madam Chairman,
application.
I move acceptance of the petition subject to the conditions.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Eldridge, second by Ms. Gardner, to approve this petition. Discussion, Mr. Eldridge.
Yes, this is a roughly 37-acre parcel on the south side of Thayer Road in Greenwood Township. It is farmland and is surrounded entirely by agriculturally zoned land with only a very modest amount of residential uses on agriculturally used land in a fairly rural part of McHenry County. As we have been told over and over again, the driver on whether these things get built or not is the interconnection agreement with Commonwealth Edison. And that goes pretty much the whole way in determining where you can locate appropriately or possibly these things, because if you can't interconnect, there is no economic possibility of building it. We have had, pursuant to Public Law 102-1123, our authority to modify these petitions significantly or to deny them removed by the Illinois State Legislature. We are in fact by law required, as long as the state standards have been met, to approve them. And the testimony has been from our staff, who we rely on, that the state standards have been met. And therefore, we are required by law to approve this. Having said that, I believe that this is a reasonably good location for such a thing. I am sympathetic with the surrounding landowners who would prefer that it was someplace else. But I think that with the screening and the planting that has been incorporated in this, that the neighbors who are unhappy now will be far less unhappy once it is up and operating, because I think it will be far less noticeable than they are concerned about. For all of the foregoing reasons, I shall vote yes.
Ms. Gardner?
I agree with Mr. Eldridge. I'd like to thank the petitioners for their very thorough presentation, answered all our questions and more. I thought you all looked familiar, and then I started thinking maybe all these solar people are starting to look the same to me. I see a lot of them. But I do appreciate the time and energy that you've put into today and also in your planning. I would really encourage you to keep in touch with the neighbors as promised, and the best you can ease their concerns. As for the neighbors, I appreciate that it's very difficult for change. But as we all know, people next door can put whatever they want and you'll have to look at it. That's always been the way it is. And at one point, that field of corn or whatever it was used to be a huge tract of trees that some farmer came along and cut down and planted corn, to the horror of all the people who lived around there and bought that property because of the trees. So keep that in mind. This is not as bad as it could be. There are many things that could go in there that would be horrific. This isn't industry, this is a very passive use. I can't say that I would have a problem living near a solar farm. I don't think that I would. A wind farm, yeah, I'd have a problem with that, not a solar farm. So I am in agreement with you.
Mr. Cozen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In southeast McHenry County, as described, the density limits the application of solar to rooftops. And as I've already said on the public record, all four sides of my backyard, I look at solar panels daily. I am not certain as to their operational functionality because they are reliant on people who in many ways have difficulty even putting out their garbage on time. Nonetheless, I look forward to an enhanced technology and am very sympathetic by the information that was presented, specifically page 7 of project, which shows the 3-phase power line that Commonwealth Edison maintains along that roadway. That 3-phase power line shows a demonstrated concern to the landscape quality of that area, showing those stars to allow those 3 phases to be clustered, much to the detriment of the quality expectation of the property owners, not realizing that their efforts to embrace the visual and landscape aesthetics puts their use and reliability of electricity at risk. If there was an option to go forward, we would certainly welcome it in southeast McHenry County without consistently looking at panels or amateur efforts to provide power. And for the reasons brought forward with the information given to us and the expertise unchallenged, I'll be supporting this petition.
Mr. Schnabel.
I would just like to say one thing. I sympathize very much with everyone that's concerned that lives nearby. Number one, I do. We've heard this countless times before from solar panel farms that have been built near far more populated subdivisions, so to speak. And a lot of people aren't too happy about that. I understand that. First thing I'll say is, if you don't want to live by one in the future, probably don't buy a house near 3-phase power. Now, I can just quickly give an example. I live with 3-phase power going right down across the street from my house. And I do know for a fact, half a mile down the road, it's already being sited for a solar farm. There's nothing that I can do about it. It's just across the border in DeKalb County. So all bets are off. But quite candidly, the way I look at it, doing all these conditional uses that we do here for gravel plants and asphalt plants and extraction and on, it's a really pretty benign use overall. And I would rather have the small solar farm down the street from me than a development of 150 tract houses, for example. That's just my own personal opinion. For what it's worth, I know it doesn't mean a lot to some of you, but that's my personal opinion. And I have to agree with everything else that's been said up to this point. I just wanted to add that in for a little take on the way that I think about this. Next.
Ms. Donovan.
Yes, well, I appreciate that people have lived in their homes as long as they have with nothing behind them or around them or whatever. I was lucky enough to be one of those people. And I'm not one of those people anymore. It tells you why. You got the long hair and you're getting old, I'm getting old. I can only hope that the houses that you didn't have to see being replaced by these solar panels, should you live another 20 years, will be back to agricultural use. This has not been a change it may look like an industrial use, but it's not. The agricultural land use is the land use. So it's not going to be that way forever. And it may not be with all the changes that there are that you're going to be around for as long as you think you will be, because there's going to be other things. We're going to see. It's change is hard. But to be clear, it's ag use now, it's ag use in the future, and that property will be very, very soil rich when it's all finished, because it's not being used all the time. We're not using all the chemicals on that area, or the owner isn't, because it's going to be used differently, and it's quiet. And I have to say yes. I wish I could say something else, but it has to be. And I will be voting in that way.
Mr. Koenig.
Just a couple of comments. I appreciate everyone's concern and their testimony and the passion with which it's been presented. Regardless of what Mr. Schnabel would like sitting, across the street from him, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. And I'm certain you don't appreciate our comments and platitudes. You're looking for results. If this were not agricultural property, and if this were not a conditional use for a solar farm, a lot of the voices and concerns you presented here, we probably could take into consideration. Given the passage, the General Assembly several years ago decided that they wanted Illinois to be a model green state. So they passed a lot of legislature to address that. And one of the things they passed was, as Charlie indicated, back at the end of 2023, they passed Public Act 102-11-23. That substantially limited our discretion as to what we can do. And I think that the concerns that you presented regarding impact on value, the General Assembly, in their ultimate wisdom, decided that they could address that by addressing the concerns here. Distance from the location, screening, and compliance with noise requirements. They probably considered that that would be the things that would impact your values of your property, and so we're going to try and minimize that to the best that we can in enacting the statute. Our job is to apply the law to the facts, with which we did. And you may not like it, but we have no choice but to apply the law to the facts. That's all I have.
And I would say I agree with the comments of my board members, and that, number one, we are obliged to approve this. And as the county, we try and do everything we can with native prairie to, making sure that our stormwater management ordinance is followed, to do everything to protect the citizens of this county and to make this a good habitat for butterflies and birds, and just to try and make this look better even. And but with the screening along the roadside, you're not even going to see this after a couple of years when those shrubs get taller. It'll take a few years for them to get tall, but the screening standards that the county has required for solar farms and being updated even since this new state law was passed, that you're not even going to notice it, I don't feel. And I would say I live at the other end of Thayer Road, and I subscribe to a solar farm, and I'm close to the one on McGuire Road, and I think it's a great benefit on my electric bill. And so I encourage you to be involved with this and take advantage of the savings. You're the first people that they have to come to. I would take advantage of subscribing to the solar farm so you get that benefit on your electricity. So I think the standards have been met, our county standards and the state standards, and I'm in favor of the request. So I'll call for the vote. Mr. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Ms. Donner?
Yes.
Mr. Kernick?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so this will go to the county with a 7-0 vote approving. Thank you, everyone, for being respectful, for participating, and thank you for the petitioners for your great presentation today. At this time, the hearing is closed.